You know, we shouldn't have had a situation like Malala where she was gunned down for fighting for the rights of young girls to have an education, because young girls should be able to live freely and have an education no matter where they live, no matter their religion, the colour of their skin, whatever. Young girls should always have those fundamental basic human rights.
Hi, and welcome to 5 Random Questions, the show where every question is an adventure. I'm your host, Danny Brown, and each week I'll be asking my guests 5 questions created by a random question generator. The guest has no idea what the questions are, and neither do I, which means this could go either way. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into this week's episode. Today's guest is Em, who's been a podcaster for over 5 years. She's also the creator, producer, and host of the film history podcast Verbal Diorama. She's here to celebrate movie making in all its forms, and is similarly passionate about independent podcasting and supporting other indie podcasters and content creators. Putting her money where her mouth is, Em is one of the people behind the Independent Podcast Awards, which is now in its 2nd year and recognises and supports these podcasters who are creating shows from their bedroom, in their spare time, on their own dime. So Em, welcome to 5 Random Questions.
Hi Danny, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm a bit nervous about these questions, I'll be honest, because, I mean, I know a lot about film history, but not so much about everything else. So let's see how we get on. But I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. And it's funny, like normally, as you just mentioned, some of the guests I've had on have said the same thing. It's kind of weird because normally you come to a chat show like this or an interview podcast like this, and you're kind of pre-prepared about what the topics are going to be, and you know, you're maybe talking about a book or your podcast or anything like that. This is completely flipped that script. It is completely random. So it's interesting to see where each conversation goes. It's all been very different so far. So I appreciate you putting yourself forward for this.
Yeah, do you know what? I thought it would be a lot of fun because, like you say, I've not done anything like this before. And I mean, I've been interviewed about the podcast before, and obviously I've been on lots of other movie podcasts, mostly talking about The Mummy, I'll be honest. So if there's any mummy questions, I am down. But yeah, I thought this would be a really interesting thing to do. And I love the idea for the podcast. I think it's a really interesting concept. So, and I've listened to a couple episodes and they were really, really fun. So I'm thinking this is going to be great.
No, I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I'm in Canada, so I can't enter it into the Independent Podcast Awards. But speaking of those, how's it gone? This is the 2nd year, as I mentioned. Obviously, it's a great initiative, and the 2nd year looks to be even bigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible, really. I think when you do anything like that, you do worry maybe that maybe it's not going to be so well received in the 2nd year. But the feedback we got after that first event was really positive. There was obviously some constructive feedback that that we could obviously work on, you know, with regards to maybe switching some of the categories around and that sort of thing. And we've actually worked on that this year. We have a panel, like a board of independent podcasts, and basically all of the ideas for the Independent Podcast Awards are basically discussed in a board meeting, with the board being of independent podcasters, like British independent podcasters of all genres, all types. Just basically we get together every couple of months or so and discuss changes, like what are we going to do? And so a lot of the changes that we've put forward for this year with regards to categories and stuff like that, that's all basically been discussed with other independent podcasts. So it's not just 1 or 2 people making decisions about the future of the Independent Podcast Awards. It's a group of independent podcasts who are all coming together to discuss what's the best way forward. And we really like that approach, just because it feels like it's made by independent podcasts for independent podcasts in that respect.
And I think that's what I like about this particular awards. I mean, obviously there's a lot of podcast and award shows out there, some massive ones, some not quite as massive, but generally there aren't a lot, I don't think there's many, to be honest, that are geared solely towards the indie podcaster, and with indie podcasters being the driving force behind it. So it's great to see, because you have the indie podcasters who know how hard it is to make a show, and they're working to recognise others in that same boat. So I love the whole initiative, and I know our erstwhile friend Mark Asquith, he's involved in it as well. So
Yes.
He speaks very highly of the organisation and the fun that goes on behind it. So kudos to that. And speaking of independent, we do have 5 independent questions, all independent from each other. So I know you're seriously looking forward to this because you couldn't wait to get on and get these questions thrown at you that aren't to do with the Mummy 1997. So are we ready to have a look at the random generation, see what pops up?
Go for it.
All righty, let's bring this up here. Okay, just a small one to start the questions off there. Question number 1. Do you think any kind of afterlife exists?
Oof. Okay, we're going in with the big guns first. Okay. Do I think any kind of afterlife exists? I would like to think yes. I would like to think that we have a finite amount of time on this earth, and whatever we do with that time on this earth is whatever we do with that time on this earth. I guess I've always kind of been more kind of spiritual than religious, shall we say. And I've always believed in spiritual things. Not that necessarily I believe in ghosts. I don't know. I've had some weird experiences in the past with regards to maybe feeling presences that may or may not have been there, like when I was a kid and stuff. And I don't know. I just always like to think. I like the idea of multiverses. Which I know is quite popular in pop culture right now. But I like the idea of every decision that we make in life, I like to call it the sliding doors effect. You either board the train or you don't board the train. And whatever happens when you board the train happens. But also you didn't board the train and something else happened. Because I think a lot of people think what if in their life. And I kind of think that maybe goes similarly into like the idea of afterlife as well. In that once your soul is done here, well, then there's the choice of where you go next, maybe. And maybe there are multiple versions of existence that are beyond this version of existence, but we will never truly know about it because you have to leave this plane of existence to go there, you know? But I don't know. I guess I've always liked to think that your soul is so personal to you. I mean, I suppose then you kind of go into, well, is reincarnation real? But I like to think, you know, as a person, as an entity, as a being, I am different to everyone else on this earth. And so my soul, you know, that spark within me that makes me me, I think I'd feel quite sad if that never kind of had an opportunity to be elsewhere. I would like to think that would go somewhere else and, you know, have a really cool life somewhere else. Yeah, so I guess fundamentally I like to think yes, because our time on this earth is so fleeting. You know, if you think of the history of Earth, we're mere specks in the general kind of, you know, history of Earth and how long this planet's been around and the creatures on this planet. So really, humans are nothing. But I like to think that maybe there's a place we go to once we are done here, because, you know, you live 80, 90, maybe 100 years if you're lucky. So yeah, there must be somewhere else.
I'm hoping, and I say this in the kind, not the kindest way, that's the wrong word. I say it in some kind of way. I'm hoping I don't live to 100. I feel, just personally, I feel that'd be a lot of, you know, you get tired of stuff, but that's just me. An interesting point you raised there, where you're on about the multiverse, you know, the multiple, almost like the multiple personas of us that may be existing and experiencing different versions of the same moment. And there's a well-known sort of like trope that every person on the planet has got a doppelganger somewhere else on the planet. Do you think that might be tying to your thinking around there's someone else that looks exactly like you, that acts like you, that speaks like you, living a life somewhere on the other side of the world? That's actually a second part of you, like a spiritual part of you that's doing the opposite of what you're doing in your current form?
I mean, it could be. I mean, if you take the idea of the sliding doors theory, which is a great movie, by the way. Everything always comes back to movies for me. And, you know, the idea that you make a decision and that decision can basically change the course of your entire life basically whether you decide to board the train or whether you do manage to board the train or not. And I've had many experiences in my life. One of the things that I always come to, because I guess I'm a big believer in fate, and that it ultimately you always end up where you're supposed to end up. But about 20 years ago, I was in quite a bad car accident, and it was basically a driver. He was driving on the wrong side of the road and he hit me head on. So there was nothing I could do. It was him that was at fault. But I can't remember who said it to me. Someone, I think it might have been my mum or something, saying, well, if you'd have only left the house 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later, that wouldn't have been you. They would have hit someone else. And then you kind of think, well, that's absolutely true. If I'd have left 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later, that guy could have hit someone else, or he may have ended up in a ditch somewhere. And maybe in another version of that, I didn't get hit and I carried on my journey and I ended up wherever I ended up and my life took a completely different path. I feel like there is a high possibility that there are versions of ourselves that are out there that maybe I don't know. I feel like I'm talking rubbish now, but but maybe from that event, I don't know. I feel like there has to be, like people talk about the Mandela effect, where things that you remember are not quite how you remember them, and people talk about like different dimensions, and like in a different dimension, it is what you think it is. But it's like there are like these mirror dimensions and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I think it's all fascinating stuff. I don't think we'll ever truly prove it. But I think there are some fascinating ideas out there with regards to different universes and different, different things that have happened. And it's like like in Loki, like it causes like a split in time. And you end up with all of these different like branches kind of going off, like with different versions of different people. And I think it's wholly possible to say, it's definitely possible to have a doppelganger. I've had people come up to me and say, oh, I saw you the other day, you were at so-and-so. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. And genuinely, people have said that to me. And I don't think I don't think that there are many people out there who probably do look a lot like me. But I suppose I've never met anyone who looks like me. So apart from my sister, maybe they saw my sister. But, it's just like weird, really strange things. And you kind of like add them up in your mind and you're like, do you know what? All of these strange things that happen to you, when you do have like spiritual like experiences when you're a kid, and like I used to think that I could see my recently deceased grandma on the end of my bed when I was a kid. And maybe I did. I don't know. But you do kind of, I think it's good to ask questions. I think it's good to not necessarily take the world at face value. I think it's good to have curiosity and an open mind as to what could be out there. And that goes for things like doppelgangers, that goes for things like multiple universes, and I think it goes for things like the afterlife as well. We cannot prove definitively whether it is or it isn't, but I don't think there's anything wrong with anyone who thinks that it does exist or thinks that it doesn't exist, because fundamentally we're never going to truly know. It's not a question that any of us on this mortal plane could ever answer, I don't think. So it's all theoretical at the end of the day, but I think it's definitely an interesting topic to talk about, and I'm really glad this is the first question actually, because this is a fascinating question.
It can either go up or down from here. But yeah, we need someone to come back from the afterlife and say, hey, it's pretty cool over here. You want to join us? Maybe not as early as that, but yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, there's the movie Ghost. I mean, he kind of comes back from the afterlife, but he can only talk to Whoopi Goldberg. So maybe we need to get Whoopi on the phone and maybe she'll be able to tell us.
Sounds good. And speaking of next lives, it's time for the next question and the life of the next question. That was a really poor segue there. I apologise, listeners, my bad. So let's have a look at, now that we've got that little easy question out of the way, let's look at question number 2. Okay, interesting. And I feel you being a movie buff and enjoying some of the culture around apocalypses, maybe. This is a really good question, I feel. Question number 2. What product would you seriously stockpile if you found out they weren't going to sell it anymore?
Okay, so the first thing that springs to mind, I expect most people, if they're asked this question, think about, stuff that during COVID, when everyone was clamouring for toilet paper and stuff like that, that would be a good answer. But the first thing that popped into my mind, genuinely, and I think this tells all of your listeners the status of my life right now, would probably be cat treats. Because my cat, Evie, she's named after the lead character in The Mummy, of course. Evie, she's a beautiful cat and she's the loveliest thing. But she really loves her treats. And if they didn't do these treats anymore, I don't know what I'd do. I literally, it's like, I feel like she would come for me in the night. I wouldn't exist anymore if these treats didn't exist. So if they said that they were stopping, these treats are called Licky Licks. They're like cat yogurty treats. They're in like a little yogurt sachet. And she has a couple of them every day and she loves them. And if I want her to do something like take a tablet, it's the only way she'll take a tablet. If I want her to come in from outside, pretty much the only way she'll come in from outside is if she has Licky Licks. So I don't know what I would do without Licky Licks. So I'm going to beg here to the people who create Licky Licks. I can't remember who it is. I can't remember who the company is, but it's honestly a lifesaver. And I've been out today to the shops to buy about 4 or 5 more boxes of the stuff because she goes through it like anything. So that is what I would seriously stockpile. If I found out they weren't selling Licky Licks, I would have to go out there and buy as much of it as possible because seriously, when that runs out, her little kitty paws are going to be like...
embedded.
Yeah, I will not survive the night. So yeah, that's the first thing that came into my head. So I feel like that's the most honest answer you're going to get.
I've got to give kudos to that name as well. I can imagine like some of the fun that could maybe be had if your cat's outside. I don't know if Evie's an outdoor cat or not, but if Evie was out in an evening or something and you're shouting out in the middle of the night, Evie, come and get some Licky Licks. That's like, and the neighbours are thinking, what depravity is going on in that house? That's an amazing name.
I mean, luckily, I think my neighbours question a lot of my choices anyway. But usually, like she just knows it as treats or nice things. So I'll say, Evie, do you want some nice things? And she'll know what nice things are straight away. So yeah, it would be the Licky Licks.
And you mentioned it's a yogurt base thing. Could you like replicate that, or is it just you think it's just like one of these things that the manufacturer knows the secret ingredient?
I mean, there are other brands that do something similar to Licky Licks, but she's quite particular. Like, she's very particular with food. She's a very strange cat in the sense that she, like a lot of cats, enjoy eating things like fresh chicken or prawns or tuna or anything like that. But Evie refuses all of those things. She's the weirdest little cat. She doesn't even get high on catnip. So she's genuinely the strangest little cat. But she loves these Licky Licks. So I'm just like, right, okay, we'll go with the Licky Licks. Could I replicate it? Honestly, I don't know, because I expect there's a lot of E numbers and stuff in it. I don't know. I haven't checked the ingredients, but it's just, yeah, it's like a paste, like a yogurty paste made up of probably not real chicken, not real salmon or any of those things. But yeah, I think we're safe because I think they're quite popular. I think a lot of cats like it. So
it's not going to go away soon.
I think we're safe. But yeah, if COVID Part 2 happens, touch wood, it never does. But if it does, everyone else is going to be going for toilet roll and I'm going to be going for Licky Licks. So
there you go, listeners. If you want a nice side hustle, get out there and buy up all the Licky Licks right now and sell them on eBay directly to M. Big profit to be made there.
Yeah.
All right, Licky Licks it is. Let's have a look at question number 3. Question 3. What makes someone a hero?
Oh, wow. Okay. What makes someone a hero?
Not buying all the Licky Licks.
No, yeah. not hogging all the Licky Licks makes someone a hero. again, this is a really interesting question because I've grown up pretty much with superhero cinema and the definition of a hero and what is a hero and what does it mean to be a hero. I grew up watching, it was actually X-Men, the animated series. And I'm a huge fan of the X-Men. The X-Men are my people. And the X-Men have always kind of skirted around what makes someone a hero, because you have all of these different characters who come from different places and many different things make them heroes or not in different cases. I always like to think, sort of stepping away from superheroes, because surprise, surprise, they're not real. I know it's terrible. We all wish that like Black Panther and Captain America were real, but sadly they're not. But thinking of like real life and real life heroes, I always kind of go, whenever I think of like a hero to me personally, I go to someone like Malala Yousafzai. She's someone who I consider a hero just because she was this young woman who was so incredibly brave, standing up to the Taliban, just for the rights for girls to learn and to be educated and to read. And sometimes I think you don't need to have, super strength, and you don't need to have special abilities, although it's very cool when you do have people who have super strength and abilities. But people who are, fighting the good fight for just basic human rights, that's like, they shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have had a situation like Malala where she was gunned down for fighting for the rights of young girls to have an education, because young girls should be able to live freely and have an education no matter where they live, no matter their religion, the colour of their skin, whatever. Young girls should always have those fundamental basic human rights. But for her to kind of be so viciously attacked, and almost die for this cause, and the fact that, she's such an inspirational person, and it's like even now she's still out there kind of fighting for the rights of these young girls, these young women. And obviously it's something that I'm quite passionate about, being a woman. Women's rights are quite important to me personally because, I am one. So if it's important to all women, it's important to me. But I think it's very easy to put people on a pedestal and to maybe suggest that maybe a specific actor or something is a hero because of whatever they've done, or a musician, and I feel like if that person is a hero to you, then they're a hero. You can't necessarily define a hero because everyone's version of a hero is going to be different. I'm pretty certain that no one will disagree that Malala isn't a hero, because I think everyone will agree that she is, maybe apart from the Taliban, but who cares what they think. But I feel like everyone has a definition inside themselves as to what it means to be heroic, or what it means to, to be that hero. And fundamentally, I think it always comes from a place of kindness. And it's so much easier in this world to be mean. It's so much easier to be nasty. It's so much easier to have hatred. It's a lot less easy to be kind. And I just feel like at the root source of any sort of heroism is always fundamentally kindness and, truth and honesty and all of that sort of stuff. But fundamentally, I think it's kindness. So I think anyone can be a hero if they show kindness and empathy. I would like to think so anyway.
Do you think that maybe the word gets bandied about a little bit too much now? You mentioned obviously Malala is a clear case of an obvious hero for what she's done. It's selfless, and it's for others as opposed to herself. Obviously, she's doing it for herself to make sure that others can get the education, etc. But then you look at, say, on the and I don't want to get into politics. I want to keep that away from this show completely. But you look at in the US, obviously they've just had the attempted assassination on the former president. And he's been called a hero because he's got a bandage on his ear and he's back out on the campaign trail. And that maybe you mentioned about, people's perceptions of heroism and what makes a hero is, to each other. But I feel that's two very wide aspects of the hero spectrum, if you like. So someone that's done a selfless act and putting themselves in danger from a cultural and national point of view, as opposed to, someone that maybe isn't quite as heroic because they're campaigning. I don't know. I had a point with that question. I probably just ran away and just rambled there, as is my one. But do you feel, I guess, does heroism as a word and aspect of life get thrown about a little bit too easily now?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like, just as an example, you get some shopping delivered by the supermarket and the guy carries it into your kitchen and you'll say, oh, thanks, you're such a hero. It's just, sometimes it is a bit of a throwaway thing. I mean, I would rather not comment on the former president, just because of, but I feel like the people who are within his group, within his community, of course they're going to think that he's a hero because that is their idea of a hero. And I think that kind of fundamentally goes back to what I tried to say earlier, was that I feel like everyone has their own idea of what a hero is. And sometimes you can idolise people and think that they are a hero because that's what you think. And in many ways, there's nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of Swifties, for example, think Taylor Swift is a hero. And in many ways, she is. Because, I love her music. I think she's great. But, would I put her in the same league as Malala? Probably not. It's arguable that Taylor Swift has done a lot for, the economy with her tours. And, I know she gives to a lot of charities and stuff like that. So in many respects, she is a hero. But it's not really comparable, I think. And I think that's the point, is that what makes someone a hero is very different depending on the circumstances that you're talking about. That's not to say, it's not to discredit any sort of heroism. The firefighter who rescues a cat from a tree is still a hero. But it's not really comparable to the Malala levels of heroism that we're talking about. So, yeah, I think it's a very flexible term, and I think maybe we do band it around a little bit too much, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. A word is just a word. It's what's behind that word that's, more important than the word itself.
And I think to your point about the fireman and the cat, if the cat's Evie and all the licks are gone, I think that fireman is going to be pretty heroic to get up that tree. So I think we can give it to the fireman. Hey there, Danny here. This podcast will forever be free to listen to. But if you enjoy 5 Random Questions and get value from the show and want to support it, you can either do that with a donation of your choosing or as a monthly supporter with a 5 Random Questions membership. Choose your preference over at 5randomquestions.com/support. And now, back to this week's episode. Alrighty, moving on. Let's have a look at question number 4. What habits are holding you back from success?
Oof. Okay. I would say there's a lot of self-doubt when it comes to the things that I do. And I feel like if I was a little bit more brave sometimes, maybe I would have a little bit more success. I don't know. It's really hard to kind of quantify it, and because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's around the corner. Like if you'd have asked me a few years ago, do you think you'd be involved with Why Now doing the Independent Podcast Awards? I'd be like, no, that's not possible. So, sometimes it is a little bit of dumb luck, I think, shall we say. But I sometimes have crippling self-doubt, and it stops me from doing a lot. It stops me from, I don't know, maybe applying for a job, for example, because I will look at the requirements and maybe I'll have 75% of the requirements or something, and I'll just go, yeah, they're not going to say yes, so there's no point, whereas I feel like if I had a bit more kind of self-confidence, I might just go, well, I'll just apply, and if they say no, they say no, but at least I've given it a go. Just that fear of rejection, I think, is always there. So I would like to think, I I would like to think that I'm reasonably successful in the field that I'm currently in, just from the point of view of not really kind of monetarily successful or, popularity successful, but sort of in the indie podcast community, I like to think that I'm quite well liked and quite well respected. And, because I'm a nice person. And people ask me to come on their podcast. So, clearly people do value me. So, but just from like a sort of professional point of view, there is a lot of me holding myself back because I think I'm worried about rejection and I'm worried that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, that sort of thing. And I do think that generally kind of is holding me back from success in a way, because I feel like if I could take those steps, then maybe so many avenues would open up to me. But because I'm so worried of, I don't have this qualification, I don't quite have that much experience, I don't meet the criteria, and therefore if I don't meet the criteria 100%, that there's no point me even trying. So yeah, I think I hold myself back quite a lot, and it's something that I'm getting better at, but it's like taking a while to get better at it, because it's always difficult when you do get, knocked back. Because I mean, I have been, I've, had like interviews for jobs that I've really, really wanted and gone, oh yeah, I feel like I'm almost there with this. And it's like, it's not for me at the end of the day. And it's disappointing, but I feel like my habit of putting myself down and me telling myself, you're not good enough, there are loads of people who are better than you, there's no way that they'll give you a chance, kind of, that kind of goes around my head a lot. And I think that definitely holds me back in many ways. The podcast is kind of its own beast. So I feel fairly confident in what I'm doing with that. But even then, like, I feel like if only I had a bit more time to do that, that would be a bit more successful. But I'm very time limited on the podcast. So time is something that you can't really get. It's very difficult to get time. But yeah, definitely sort of from me in a kind of a personal professional capacity, I definitely think my habits of my kind of self-deprecation and my self-confidence and my self-esteem definitely hold me back. This is a very deep question.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned also that becomes habitual. I mean, it starts off as a mental block or maybe an emotional block, but then because of that, it turns into a habit almost. You're almost expectant to, not be successful for a job interview or a date or anything like that. We've had maybe struggles there. And I'm curious, is it an option? So it becomes a habit to not be successful at something, but to counter that, you mentioned obviously verbal diorama, the way people perceive you and respect you. Do you make notes as an individual to get over the parts that you aren't succeeding and becoming habits? Do you make notes of all the successes you are having to counter that? So now you say, okay, you know what? I am successful, as you mentioned, with the podcast and your approach to the Indie Podcast Awards, etc. And gradually that list will become bigger than the non-successful list. And then you've won, basically.
Do you know what? I've never actually thought of doing that before. So I might give that a go and see if that helps me get over my... Yeah, because I think it all stems from anxiety. And my relationship with anxiety is very complicated. But anxiety fuels a lot of what I do. But it also fuels it in a bad way, because I have a tendency to overwork and I have a tendency to overschedule myself. And that just does not help anyone. So I'll definitely give that a go. I'll write out a list and I'll see if that helps, because I feel like you have to fully acknowledge your flaws in order to at least attempt to be better, a better human being, because there are no perfect human beings in the world. Not even Keanu Reeves, even though, he's very almost there.
He's pretty perfect.
He's pretty perfect, isn't he? But, I feel like there's going to always be an excuse to hold you back. And it is just taking that leap of faith. That's a line from a great movie called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's just a leap, Miles, a leap of faith. And that scene just blows my mind all the time because it's beautiful. But it's true. Sometimes you do have to take that leap of faith. And you've just got to get to that point where you're at the edge and you're ready to do it. And for me, it's getting to the edge. You know, it's that idea of actually walking to the edge and then taking the leap. Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, speaking of leap of faith, we're almost at the end. We just have that one more leap to take.
Okay.
So you ready for this final question, Em?
Yep. Let's do it.
Let's see what we got. Interesting. I feel this maybe is a follow-on from the last one, but let's see.
Okay.
Question number 5, Em. What is the most difficult challenge thus far in your life?
Wow. These questions are really super personal.
I told you this was going to be an easy episode.
I feel like this is a therapy session. The most difficult challenge. Okay. So the most difficult challenge actually ended up bearing amazing fruit. So the most difficult challenge that I have been through personally in my life, because, we've all been through difficult things. But the most difficult for me was going through a divorce and the stuff that came before the divorce. Because let's just say my ex-husband did a bad thing and I found out about that from the person that he did the bad thing with. So it was going through all of that. It was going through, obviously, the separation during a time when my anxiety was basically peaking off the scales as well. But going through all of that is basically how Verbal Diorama actually came to be, because I needed something to focus on that wasn't all of that, because my brain was there was so much going on in my brain. Because anyone who's been through relationship troubles, relationship trauma, separation, divorce, all of that sort of stuff, then it's a very kind of emotionally fragile time. So you're very emotionally fragile. You feel like your world has basically just crumbled around you and you have no control over anything. And that's basically how I found myself, in that I felt like I had no control, because obviously he had been off doing his own thing, and I had no control, like zero control over anything. And the idea to obviously separate and to get divorced was fundamentally his idea, because he was done. So I feel like when you go through something like that and you have zero control, the first thing that I wanted to do was I wanted a semblance of control. And Verbal Diorama was that control. And so while it was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life, and I would never wish it upon anyone in the world. And I know people have gone through worse, and I'm not suggesting that it's the worst thing ever. People have gone through worse. However, it's a very humbling experience to go through, especially when you realise that the person who you thought that they were is not that person. I will say that he, going through the separation and the divorce, like, he genuinely was, a great person. He wasn't awful about it. He was as supportive as he could be to me during my depression and anxiety and all of that sort of stuff. And I give him thanks for that, because he could have walked away and he didn't. But Verbal Diorama basically came from all of that. So in many ways, it's actually a good thing. It's actually, you turn a negative into a positive, and it's become this amazing thing that's just this huge part of my life. And had I not gone through all of that, then I wouldn't have all of this, and I wouldn't be here now talking to you, Danny, because it was going through that kind of spurred all of this to happen. So while it was a pretty horrible thing to go through, I always kind of say, well, look at what it gave me. It kind of pushed me into this podcasting arena that I dabbled in before. This Verbal Diorama is not my first podcast rodeo. I dabbled in it before and I enjoyed it, but I kind of struggled to keep it going. And with all of this and everything going on, I was like, no, I'm focused now. Because once I'm hyper-focused, I am focused. So it's hyper-focused. Yeah, let's get this done. Then my granddad died. So then it was like, oh, okay, now my granddad's passed away. And it was basically a culmination of all of that, plus my granddad passing away. I went to visit my granddad as he was lying in the funeral home. And I said to my granddad, Granddad, I'm going to do this podcast. And that's what I did. So, yeah, it was pretty awful. But I feel like something good came out of it in the end.
And it's almost like full circle. We started this episode talking about spirituality and afterlife, etc. And you mentioned the sliding doors effect, and that's a perfect example of it there. Had that awful experience not happened, all the good things you're experiencing now and all the the cool stuff that you're doing now with your creative life as well as your personal, it would never, or it may have happened, but not to the level it is, or not in the way it has. So it's like you see, nobody likes to go through horrible examples of life, but sometimes we have to go through that horrible stuff to really appreciate the good stuff that comes afterwards, I feel.
Absolutely. No one knows what would have happened. No one knows what's happened to that other version of Em who's still married, maybe. No one knows. I hope that she is happy, but I mean, chances are he might have still done that. I don't know. But that's his sliding doors thing, his choice, and he took his choice. But fundamentally, I feel like I did okay out of it. So yeah, it's like life hands you what life hands you. You know, if life hands you lemons, make lemonade,
or tequila.
or yeah, or put them in an alcoholic beverage and get completely drunk. But I feel like like I said at the start, we have a finite amount of time on this earth. I like to think that there is something beyond, but for the time that I am on this earth, I want to be the best person that I can be. Not necessarily a hero, because I don't think I qualify, but just be good and kind and honest and have empathy for people and podcast, because why not?
Why not indeed? Well, I've really enjoyed this chat, and I appreciate you being so open and transparent with your answers. I know some of them we got real into the weeds there, so I appreciate that. In fairness, in every episode, I do throw the gauntlet, or the gavel, the judge's gavel, if you like, over to my guest, because I've put you on the spot for the last 30, 40 minutes or so. It's only fair that you get to do that to me. So, this is where you can throw your random question back at me.
Okay, so this was the first question that came to mind. So, on Verbal Diorama, I do something called the obligatory Keanu reference. Now, I've already mentioned Keanu Reeves because he is the best of men, and I feel like he always deserves at least one mention at all times. But my question to you, Danny, what is the best movie starring Keanu Reeves?
Oh, man. I mean, I guess the obvious would be his big blockbusters, which is obviously, The Matrix and all such. For me personally, so I love the John Wick series. I don't think that's my favourite. I love the John Wick series. It's amazing. But I think my favourite movie of his... Now, is it best or favourite? Because they're two different things, right?
I'll tell you what, let's amend the question. What's the best and what's your favourite? Let's amend the question.
So for the best, I'm going to go with Matrix 1. For the best for me anyway. It didn't... Because Keanu Reeves, and I think you'll be one of the first to say, he's not the most gifted of actors when it comes to, the gravitas, but he does his roles well. He knows what he's capable of, and he does his roles well. And I thought The Matrix was a perfect, vehicle for him from an action point of view and from a whole, character point of view. Same with John Wick. I thought John Wick was amazing for Keanu Reeves. My favourite, though, is Point Break.
Oh,
Johnny
good
Utah.
Choice. Good choice.
That was when that came out. I believe I would be in my 20s, I think. when that came out. And it was just, there was something about it at that time when it came out and where I was in life at that time. Johnny Utah, Patrick Swayze's character, the whole, the bromance between these two, the scenery, the surfing, the heist. It was just perfection. And I watched there was a remake of Point Break recently, if I recall.
Yes,
and I watched that. Yeah, it was okay, but it wasn't Point Break. So I'm going to go with, it's a split between The Matrix and John Wick for best, but favourite would be Point Break.
Oh, I mean, they're all good choices, to be fair. I would have accepted literally any movie, because I agree with you. A lot of people say that he's a bad actor. I don't think he is. I think he's a wise actor, because I feel like he does choose his roles very carefully. And the only time he has kind of gone outside that is when he was kind of earlier in his career and he was trying different things. Like, he did a lot of Shakespeare and stuff like that because he loved Shakespeare. So, he did Much Ado About Nothing, which he's great in, by the way, and really, really hot. But, and people often point to Dracula as being the low point, but it's an outstanding movie. It's a really good movie, and his performance doesn't take anything away from the fact that's a great movie. So I think now he knows what he can do, and the whole John Wick series, I mean, they are incredible movies. I love movies like that. I feel like they are so stylish and so well shot, and the choreography is great. Yeah, and he works to his strengths, and good for him, I say, because and obviously he's a very attractive man. I mean, I don't think there's anyone on this earthly plane that we're currently on, maybe in the spiritual planes as well, who would deny Keanu Reeves, because he's a good looking man and he's a good, kind man. So I think many will look up to him as a hero for his various charity work and stuff that he's done in the past. Just kind of linking it back to all the other questions there. But yeah, those are great choices.
And speaking of kind and non-media, where can people find you and check out your podcast, obviously, and get to know the cool stuff that you do in the Independent Podcast Awards, if they want to be involved in that, if they're in the UK, for example? Where can everyone find you?
Well, so first of all, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for having me, Danny. It's been so much fun. A little bit deep, but a lot of fun. And if anyone is interested in finding out more about Verbal Diorama, then, well, you can find me on any podcast app that you found this podcast on. Just search for Verbal Diorama. There's over 260 episodes now, and it is a film history podcast. So I like to talk about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't. And it's a lot of fun. I'm a huge movie nerd just generally, but I love film history and I love the stories behind the scenes. And yeah, every week it's full on research every week. So it takes me a long time to put these episodes together, but it's so much fun to do. And I learn something every week. So if I learn something every week, then I'm hoping that the people who listen are learning something every week as well. Find me on podcast apps. My website is verbaldiorama.com, and I'm all over social media at Verbal Diorama, whether that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, Letterboxd, whatever. I'm always at Verbal Diorama, and people can feel free to get in touch with me and talk to me about movies, because that is the bread and butter, and that's what I love to do. So, yeah. And just on the Independent Podcast Awards, submissions are closed for this year now. We're actually in the process of judging the submissions that we currently have. However, I think the chances are fairly good that we'll probably come back for a year 3. I can't confirm that at this stage, but I think we're probably looking quite good. But yeah, we're going through judging at the minute, and the ceremony itself is in October. So yeah, fingers crossed for all of those amazing podcasts. And I think nominations, are going to be announced in September after judging. So yeah, I guess if you are a British or Irish independent podcast and you're interested, then keep an eye on social medias and stuff like that. And I'm sure it'll be announced as soon as possible, if and when year 3 is taking place.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to leave all these links in the show notes. So whatever app you're listening on, or if you listen to this online on the website, be sure to check the show notes afterwards, and all the links will be there. So again, I appreciate you.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks for listening to 5 Random Questions. If you enjoyed this week's episode, be sure to follow for free on the app you're currently listening on, or online at 5randomquestions.com. And if you feel like leaving a review, well, that would make me happier than that time I was an extra on the movie set of Restless Natives, which was filmed in and around my home city of Edinburgh. If you look super close when the two leads are on their motorbike being chased through Princess Street and see someone in the background waving their arms and sporting a big cheesy grin, that might be me. But seriously, if you did want to leave a review, you can do that at 5randomquestions.com/review. It would make my day. Until the next time, keep asking those questions.